is up, sexy people? It's Dave, it's Duncan, back from Metal Epidemic for another album review. And for this review, Duncan and I have been checking out the new album from French Avant-Garde Metal outfit Hypno5e. The band's album Sheol will be released on...
How's that pronounced?
Sheol.
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 Sheol want a single C? Fuck that. Fuck that. Fuck that.
Sheol. Released on February 24th via Pelagic Records. This is album number 6 from Hypno5e, which follows up their 2019 album, A Distant Dark Source.
Before you go into it, Dave, do you think if you want an album on Pelagic Records, it has to be over an hour long? It's possibly. 59 minutes and 45 seconds. Sorry, it does not make the cut. To the bin with you.
Could you add an intro to that album?
Is there anything we can do to make it a little longer? Our fans demand over an hour or your money back.
It does seem to be a thing though, eh? Like their albums...
Every single one. I'm not complaining.
No.
But it's every single... Like, as soon as you say Pelagic, I'm like that. Long haul.
Yeah.
I'm like that. Like, I'm going to get my comfy pants on. Let's do this.
Yeah, for sure. So, in the Hebrew Bible, Sheol is the place where all souls meet after their death to remain in silence and to turn to dust once more. Explains main songwriter Emmanuel Jesua about the album title. It is the distant dark source as described on the band's previous record, a thrilling 70-minute long magnum opus which saw the band conjure up a night on the old shores of the lake, following a man looking for the ghost of a woman he loved. Sheol is the story of what was before that night.
You can't say that anymore. We're Scottish. I keep thinking you're going to do a Billy Connolly. Shall it be a Sheol? We can't do it. Our accent will fucking ruin this review.
We're sorry.
Sheol.
So it's the story of what was the night before. The two albums are built like the myth of Sisyphus, not sure if I pronounce Sisyphus, in a cycle. Sheol begins.
I'm not going to be able to do this. Oh no, this was a bad idea.
Begins where a distant dark source stops, and a distant dark source ends where Sheol begins.
Yeah. Sheol beginning this journey takes a single step.
Fucking hell.
If you're cold, remember your Sheol. That's a shame. Like, because they've put a lot of work into this, and our accent is ruining this.
Okay. The album was produced by Hypno5e and then mixed by Chris Edrich.
Ooh. Now. Interesting.
Chris also recorded the new Klone album, which we just reviewed last week.
Oh.
And there's a similarity here, Duncan, because
French.
Like Klone, yes, French. Hypno5e is a band that started off pretty heavy, pretty raw, and then have progressively become more ambient and cinematic as time has gone on.
Or as the internet would tell you, sold fucking out.
Or did they? And this album feels like another extension of that sound they've been crafting over the last decade, like the new Klone album. What did you think about the new Hypno5e album? I'm not going to say the title again.
That's good. Track number 1, Sheol, part 1. I remember the previous album.
Mm-hmm.
I remember being very captivated by it, but I remember using certain words.
Okay.
One of those words was Gojira. I'm happy to say that in reviewing this album, I would use the word Gojira less.
Yes, I'd agree.
And I was quite happy about that. There are moments where it's inevitable. They're French. They have a progressive kind of metal element about them.
Yeah.
It veers a little bit death metal, but not quite.
Yeah.
Inevitably, you're going to sound like... I feel sorry for bands nowadays because Gojira have such a... They really tapped a particular sound so well and associated with it, that whether a band is meaning to or not, they can sound Gojira-esque without. But it's less on here. I suppose the big thing that stood out for me on this one was I wasn't entirely sure after the opening track where we were going. So I understood that, like, if you look at the track listing, the album has ostensibly for 8 tracks as three movements, right? So it has 3 sets of a call and an answer, right? They come in tracks 1 and 2, which are Sheol, parts 1 and 2, Late Sorrow, and Lands of Haze. In the middle of the album with Tuka, parts 1. I thought Tuka was part 2. Anyway, there is a part 2 to come. Part 1 is another. I think part 2 is supposed to be Lava from the Sky. I think it's just my install of the download. Otherwise, I've got part 1 with no answer. And then part 3, which is Slow Streams of Darkness, part 1 and 2, which are Sacred Woods and Solar Mist, right? So you've got a call and an answer, right, each time. I love that when bands, especially like bands in the kind of proggy side of things, do things, because you set up something with a particular tone, generally lighter, and you build up on motifs that when the heavier element comes in, what you're met with is something that is like almost the answer to a question that you didn't know had been asked, right? And you get that with Sheol Part 1 to begin with, which starts off with what sounds like Mandalorians, right, being like pleasantly picked, and the sound of, I'm assuming Greek, maybe Italian, who knows, a foreign tongue, which is not Scottish, that can't pronounce Sheol without saying shawl, right? Like, it starts off with that way with these, like, I'm assuming spoken word, maybe sampled from a movie, I'm not entirely sure, but these elements come in and it's very tranquil and very serene, and then Lands of Haze kicks in and it's your first full-on cunt punt, right? That this album is gonna really just like enthrall, right? Because Lands of Haze is pretty much like it's Ron Seal. It's what it says on the tin. It gives you these like huge element. Like, I can't stress this enough. Like, we talked about Klone, the review will be out. That album sounds fucking massive. Sheol sounds fucking massive, right? Like, if you told me there was 12 people in this band, I'd be like, that. Only 12, Dave? Kind of feels like we're shortchanging 4 or 5. It's huge sounding, right? Drums, massive, like impactuous. Guitar work, like clean, but also like it fills up every crevice of like your audio spectrum. And vocally, it's huge. It's huge. Like, everything about it, like the bass work, it's great. And it's all about giving you drink, journeys, and it's not even just journeys. It's about like specific movements of music that carry you through. And by the ends of Lands of Haze, with all the elements that are heavier and like, you know, and bits that are, you know, like they're clean and sprawling is a great word to describe it. I was kind of at that point, I was like, right, finger on the pulse, know where we're going. This is cool. This is the Hypnos I know, and we're fine. And then Bone Dust kicked in, and I was instantly kind of put on the back foot of, all right, we're going somewhere else. We're lifting and we're going somewhere. The thing about these tracks are, notwithstanding 2 tracks which are 2 to 2.5 minutes long, the majority of the tracks here are lengthy, right? We're talking, like 9-10 minutes long. There's maybe a 5-minute track here or there peppered in, but we can go easily over 10 minutes if we want to. And the danger with that, and Pelagic Records hasn't been immune to this, if I'm honest, is that you could be stuck in an album where you kind of feel like, are we just doing this to be long, or are we doing this because the song needs it? Bone Dust is a great example of a band that are at the top of their writing craft. Like, it has clear, decisive movements, a really good song arc, which carries you right through. It's captivating, engrossing. And then we're on to Tuaka, and at that point, I was kind of, on the listening experience, especially on the first time through, I was at that stage where I felt personally that all bets were kind of off. Not that they'd moved so dramatically away from anything, just my orientation on what I thought I was going to get might not be what I actually thought I was going to get.
Mm-hmm.
It's an album that doesn't really necessarily get all that heavy. For the most part, like predominantly you could say 75% of this album sits more in an avant-garde sort of proggy side of things than necessarily the straight up savagery of what they do bring. And it is in there, the Dreamer in his dream has elements which lean into heavier parts. Certainly by the time you reach Sacred Woods and Solar Mist, we get those elements that evoke more of, and I hate to keep using them as an example, but they are the premier example, Gojira. You get those elements where a particular sort of staccato guitar riff kicks in over a really tight percussive section, and you're kind of brought into that sound. The biggest thing that Sheol has in its arsenal for it to make it stand out is that I think it is the signs of a band reaching like a kind of almost an apex maturity, where I kind of feel like, very much like you were saying, there's been a clear, and it's not a quick, it's a clear transition of from release to release. They've found themselves gravitating more towards this kind of not ambient but experimental fuller sound. And this is the one where I kind of felt like that they'd kind of just said, you know what, we've got albums full of heavy shit, right? We could do this for days, but we want to really focus in on that more intricate songwriting styling. And this is the one where the balance worked out the best for me. I genuinely felt like the tracks invited me to get lost in them while listening to them. And I think that's a gift. It's not an easy gift to do as a songwriter, to write something that doesn't feel needless, but more needful. And I felt like this one had a lot of it. That being said, and really my only negative, like overall on this, is notwithstanding all the engrossing nature of it, I do think this album is too long. It could be because you graced my Palm with silver this week with two very short albums that I could spin a lot. I did feel myself kind of like needing to be in a particular mood set to sit down and listen to Sheol, because it's the sort of album that you can't just blast in the background. It kind of demands that you spend time picking out everything, very much like Klone. It's an album where you kind of need to listen to it all to understand and appreciate its fullness. And what I found was that by about the 50-minute mark in the album, I kind of felt like I'd had it. You know what I mean? I'd absorbed what I could. That's not to say that the remaining hour, 15 minutes on the album, notwithstanding the hour that came before, isn't worth your while. It really is. It just kind of felt to me like in concept and scope, it's so big that I kind of feel like it at times loses a bit of objectivity about focus. So it meanders in a really pleasant way, but when you come back to the re-listen through it, I feel that meander lost it. So it's why I spent so much time saying about on the first listen you go this way, and you're brought into it. By about the third listen, I kind of felt myself saying, well, that bit could be a bit shorter. Or I don't know if I would even have this track on this album. So I think they're writing the best stuff they've ever written. I genuinely feel they're a band that are on the perfect label for it. They're surrounded by a great crop of bands that are really pushing the boundaries of progressive metal at the moment to levels that are really, really interesting. On the re-listen, my only gripe is I think it's maybe a song too long. I think you could chop a 10 minutes out of this one, and I think it would flow just as well and would invite maybe an extra listen beyond what I'd already given it.
Okay.
But the last thing I'll say is you mentioned production duties and all the rest and names that pop up. It really does sound as good as it's going to get. Like if they get a better production somewhere down the road, or like on the next album, will be like my jaw will be on the fucking floor. This dude has got fucking talent for days. The mixing and mastering, it sounds fucking massive. Everything sounds massive. It's that auditorium experience we mentioned on the Klone review, that you could feel yourself sitting in the middle of a seated auditorium and the band are playing just for you. That is that good. But that is my thoughts on the album.
Okay.
Dave, Dave, a man who loves his albums long and girthy. How did you get on with in French? Yeah, like a baguette. How did you get on with Sheol?
Well, I'd heard the first two singles and I was like, oh, this is really piquing my interest.
You were ahead of me.
I was like, one was really ambient and clean and textured, and other had these big fucking progressive riffs. So I was ready for just sticking this on and loving every minute of it. This album didn't go as well as expected for me.
Right, so you're on the other side then.
Actually, my first two listens to this, I couldn't finish it. Like I got about the halfway mark and just kind of gave up. I enjoyed the start of the album, so like beginning with Sheol Part 1 and 2. It's an intro and then into this like 10-minute epic of big, very progressive riffs that are amalgamated with these kind of long, sprawling, ambient kind of prog sections, very dense, packed with varied like textures, and it reminded me of like almost like a more progressive version of The Ocean at times. And then track 3 kicks in with Bone Dust, and it's got these like beautifully recorded strings, bits of electronics scattered throughout the background, and again kind of takes you on this bit of a kind of roller coaster of sounds and kind of dynamics. It's very cinematic, very grand in size, and incredibly well performed. And that's one thing I would say, the musicianship on this album is of a very kind of high standard. I love metal that incorporates really like tasteful strings like this. It kind of adds this extra level of almost a kind of emotional level for me. And when those kind of big riffs kick in after the long build up, it's very satisfying. Did get some Gojira vibes on that track. Sounds huge. And then something kind of happened for me. I hit a wall in the kind of middle of the album, and I couldn't get past it. I was just like, every time I listened to the album, I got to that middle section from kind of like Tukka Part 1, and I just found myself really kind of losing interest. And that track is fully clean and ambient. There's no heavy guitars on it. I don't think there's even any drums, maybe a bit of percussion. It feels like a kind of middle of the album type track, a bit of a kind of breather moment, but to be honest, I felt like it didn't really need it.
But Bone Dust doesn't need an ambient track that comes after it.
No,
that might be where I trip up on it. Like, see, when I was saying that there's a track that might, there's a song on this album that might not be there, like might not be needed on it, like subsequent listens. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's the track, because it does it sucks any momentum was sucked out because it's a clean track.
100%. It kind of had the opposite effect for me. I kind of wanted it to go a bit harder, and it doesn't. But then it kicks into Lava from the Sky, which starts again very clean, very tranquil, very minimalist, and then builds from the ground up. And I think there was too much kind of downtime for me, and I just completely checked out when that happened. When I went back to it for a third time, I got on better with it. I think the second half of Lava from the Sky and The Dreamer in His Dream, great tracks once they kind of get moving. But again, neither of them come out of the gate swinging. Both take their time in building up and bringing the tracks to a peak. And when they do, there are some like really like ground shaking moments, really good grooves, quite discordant. There's some kind of angular type riffs in there as well. And when those parts kicked in, I was kind of hooked back in. The last track as well, which felt to me like a kind of similar kind of throwback to the first track from the start of the album. It's much more instant and probably one of the kind of heavier tracks on the album overall. So for me, like there's moments of this that I enjoyed. I think there are parts that are interesting here and very satisfying from a riffs perspective. But there's also sections of the album that just kind of felt a bit underwhelming to me. And I think it's a bit of a combination of things. The album feels very conceptual. It feels like you're following a story, and I totally get that vibe from this album. The tracks do feel all interconnected. But because of the length, I feel a lot of it kind of gets repetitive and a little bit too drawn out for me. Some of the tracks are really long. Like there's 3 tracks on the album that amount to just over half the album.
Yes.
And I just didn't feel like they warranted that length. I found myself switching off a lot of the time, and then like a heavy riff would kick in and I'd kind of be back into it. And I was just like, it was really frustrating for me, because I'm like, I should love this album, but you know, like on paper, this has got me written all over it. It's French, it's expansive, it's dynamic, the musicianship's great, but it just didn't grab me the way I thought it would.
Sort of thing where you like, and I do this a lot with bands that have longer form songs that I feel, I kind of think, like live, they're going to have something going on behind them, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's going to be some video or something linked up to it, and that's where your attention is drawn.
Yeah.
So it's almost like the soundtrack to something you can't see, which is very difficult to pull off in an audio format, because you have that. There's no visual stimuli to carry your attention. You're purely left with the music.
Yeah.
And that I think that might, you know, if that doesn't cross that. Then there's a lot of moments where the band sound like they're playing a riff a long time, or the bit that they're building up never arrives. I'll be curious about that when it comes out. I would have thought you would have been. I don't know what your grade is, but I think I know. I would have thought you would have liked it more than I did, which is surprising me right now.
Yeah,
because I thought I was going to be the Debbie Downer on this. So.
I think like even the production as well. I think the production is good. I think the instrumentation sounds very natural and spacious. The guitars sound massive against that kind of cinematic backdrop. I didn't like the drums. I felt the drums are very
Did you see his face twitch? Didn't like the drums.
I feel like they're very clean and they're very, very weighty and like real. There's a lot of impact, but I felt like there were moments where they were very overpowering in the mix, where they were just a bit too far out in front for me. And I guess maybe just the drummer in me just kind of being pedantic possibly, but it just, for some reason, when the heavy parts kicked in, the drums just felt a little bit too loud. Vocally, I think that like Emmanuel sounds fucking great. His tonal screams are so on point. The strings were a really classy touch to the album. They've got a new drummer and bassist. I think they've done a great job on the album, considering they've only been in the band just over a year, so I think they've slotted in seamlessly. And like, it's frustrating because I can tell a lot of preparation has gone into this album. To write like 12-minute songs with lots of layers and detail like this must take a while. I can't like knock the level these guys are working at. It's impressive, but like you said, I feel like I need to be in a certain headspace to listen to this, especially in one go at 63 minutes long or 65 minutes or whatever it was. It was I found it a bit of a struggle to get through. There are small sections that I really liked and stuck with me, but not enough from a 60-odd minute album. I feel like they maybe pushed that experimental avant-garde side a little bit too far, and it's kind of diluted the fundamentals a little bit. It has some cool moments, but as an album, it didn't hold my attention at all. So what are we thinking? Scores for the new Hypno5e album. What's your grade?
So I thought I was coming in low with my 3.5. Like I genuinely thought I was gonna get through my review. I was gonna give my grade. You were gonna browbeat the shit out of me, and I was gonna like come off the record and go like that. Did I even understand this album? It's a 3.5 for me. Like right. I say, I think there's maybe is a song too long somewhere. It seems like I didn't struggle with it as much as you did in terms of like the composition. For the most part, it works really, really well for me, and I enjoyed like languishing in the movements. I do feel though there is a point, and you've probably hit the nail on the head, where we get to track 4, where I do feel like all the life is sucked out the album to the point where it kind of feels like Lava from the Sky is almost like the band trying to start the album again. And that's, like when you're at that stage with essentially from track 5 to 8 about half the album length. You know what I mean? Like there, it does kind of feel like you're.
Yeah.
Does make me wonder if this was 2 EPs. Would it work better? You know,
Possibly.
if took apart one another being the closing song of the first EP, and then Lava from the Sky through to Solar Mist was the second EP, would it work better? Potentially.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, that's clearly not how the band wanted to release it. It's clearly not how we listened to it. I mean, they're super talented. As ultimately, regardless, they're super talented. This is them probably at their most grand yet. And it'll be interesting to see if that's the road they want to continue going down, or if they want to bring back. They have certainly sacrificed some of the heavier elements for sure that did make certain tracks previously stand out a bit more. So 3.5 is where I'm coming in. I thought it was a low grade. I think you're coming in lower, which is just blows my mind. So drop the bomb, Dave.
Oh, it's tough to score, man. It really is. I think, like, from a technical point of view, it's very well done. Musicianship is great. Each member, brings their A game. The production is good. Aside from the drums being a little too overpowering for me, I think apart from that, you'd struggle to find anything out of place in the production. And there are little set pieces that work for me here and there on like certain portions of the album, but there's other parts where I just completely checked out and I kind of wanted to skip. So I don't know if I'll come back to this, to be honest. It's just at that length. Maybe if it was 2 EPs would have been easier for me. I'm coming in at a 3 out of 5 on this one.
Ooh.
Sorry. Not what I expected to be grading this album at all, by the way, but that's my feelings. Hypno5e and Sheol is out on February 24th on Pelagic Records. I'll put some links to the band below.
Sheol want to release 2 EPs instead?
Sheol should have done that. I'm kidding. I think, to be honest, I think this album, it could go either way. I think there could be people out there that really like this side.
I think what we'll find out is very, very quickly we are in the horrible, dank minority on this.
Probably. Links below to the band, to the pre-order. Check it out. Let us know what you think. Stick some comments in once you've had a listen. Happy to hear your thoughts and opinions on it. That is the review. Thank you for checking it out. Much appreciated. We'll be back with another review very soon. But until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Sheol.